Mike Norvell made some pretty bold comments on the transfer portal yesterday that I don't know if people were quite ready to hear, but he was absolutely spot on. I'll show you his comments in just a moment, but I do think you're going to enjoy it. If you're a Florida State fan, if you're a rival hater that's tuned in, maybe you'll think it's a shot at your team. I don't necessarily know that it was a shot at UF or Miami, maybe, but I do think that it was a shot at the people who label him just a guy who uses the portal, just a guy who recruits that way, and a guy who can't recruit high school, whatever, right? Like, I think it was a shot more towards that narrative than it was any one specific team. Go ahead and listen to that clip, and then let's talk about it.
It's one of those things that you look at it a year ago, and it really was about the same percentage. I mean, we had roughly 30, I think it was 34 newcomers a year ago, and it's almost the dynamic of it. When we've been about 65% high school players have come in, and about 33% of the newcomers have been transfers. And so when you look at how that's kind of all come together, it's really a very similar number here this year. And I think that's probably working towards the new age of college athletics, with the change and with the transitions. But it's about being right. And, there's plenty of people that have taken more transfers, and people point to ours because ours are good. Like, they do a great job when they get here. They make impacts. But you also see the development of the young guys and that have been here and grown. Like, you look at.
He said there are plenty of people who take more transfer than us. They point to ours because ours are good. We talked about this last year. It was actually in May. I went back and watched the video because I wanted to see what I had said about this last year. But I sat down with Mike Norvell in Tampa, and we talked about the transfer portal, and he looked me in the face and he said this exact phrase. Very similar, but he said, there are a lot of teams that take a lot more guys than us. We just take the right ones. What's he mean by that? Well, Florida State has this narrative of being this portal conglomerate team because they take a similar amount of guys as everybody else. They take more guys than some people, less than others. In fact, before this year, Miami had taken more guys in the portal than Norvell did. There was a year that Florida took more guys than Norvell did. And Florida State gets pointed to because the transfers that the Seminoles take are actually good. They're not just nobodies that you never hear from again. And when you look at their track record, you look at the guys that Florida State has brought in, and you look at the guys that other teams have brought in, it's really not comparable. You think about the difference makers that Florida State has taken year after year after year. You think about Keon Coleman last year. You think about Jaheim Bell, Fintrell Cypress, Braden Fisk, Kyle Morlock, Daryl Jackson. There's a ton that we didn't even mention that got good, solid reps on that offensive line as well. But you think about the difference makers, the guys that are going high in the NFL draft, like Keon Coleman and Braden Fisk, and then Fintrell Cypress, who may go high next year. Jaheim Bell, who made a massive difference. Other teams aren't pulling in that type of talent from the portal year after year after year. You look at the year before, Jared Verse, Trey Benson, Johnny Wilson, a couple of offensive linemen, and Emmanuel and Turrentine that made huge differences, Tatum Bethune and others. You go back another year, you look at Dylan Gibbons and Jamie Robinson, Jermaine Johnson, who is starring in the NFL now, Kier Thomas and others. Florida State continues to hit over and over and over again, and other teams just aren't doing that. Other teams just aren't having that same level of success. Why is Florida State doing this? Why are they so good in the portal? I don't even necessarily know that this was something that Mike Norvell wanted to do. I don't know that when he got to Tallahassee, he thought, you know what, I'm going to utilize the portal better than anyone else in the country. You can debate Lane versus Norvell. I don't really care. I think when you look at the results of the guys who have panned out from the portal, I think Norvell clears easily. If you want to have the conversation around who has gotten more or better talent in, it's close. Lane hasn't had guys pan out the same way that Norvell has. He just hasn't. That's just not even up for debate. But why did Norvell do this? I think it was something that he had to do. I think this strategy, this method, this talent acquisition, acquiring from the portal was born out of necessity. I think he was in such a situation where Taggart left this roster so depleted And the portal was so new, and Norvell knew that he needed to win quickly. Florida State fans were already frustrated with the way that the Jimbo era ended. They were frustrated with the way that the Taggart era went down, and they didn't like the way that the Norvell era was off and running. And so what did he do? He had to go to the portal. He didn't have the option of waiting around. The recruiting at that time just wasn't good enough. We were recruiting in the 20s. And so almost out of necessity, he had to get into the portal. But man, he utilized it to perfection. There was nobody else in the country who was doing what he was doing in the portal. I think portal recruiting comes down to a couple of things. I think it comes down to playing time, which Florida State had plenty to offer. And at this point, I think it comes down to NIL. I think it comes down to, can you pay me? Can you be competitive? Can you be at the very top of the game? There's not really these recruiting games that go on. You don't have emotional, young 16, 17-year-old kids making dumb decisions. I think that in the portal era, you see playing time and NIL matter a ton. And I think that's why Florida State's been successful for the last couple of years. They've had a lot of playing time to give out. They've had a lot of potential for guys to get on the field quickly, probably due to some of their own faults, probably due to the fact that they have not been elite. I know that I'll get people upset with comments, hey, Norvell's doing a great job. I'm not saying he's not. I love Mike Norvell. I'm doing an entire video right now to hype him up. Probably due to the fact that their recruiting has not been at an elite level. There's room for guys to come in and play right away. Has recruiting gotten better? Yes, I know. You don't have to jump in the comments saying that I'm a hater. It has gotten better. But is it elite? Absolutely not. And so there's room. There's room for guys to come in and make a difference immediately. But without a solid NIL, it's not just playing time. It's a solid NIL as well. While we mention that, we'll give some love to the Battle's End. If you're not a member, we've tried to encourage you for months and months and months to become one and support their efforts and support what they're doing. NIL is not perfect right now. Our NIL situation is not perfect in this sport right now, but I will tell you the Battle's End does a phenomenal job of making sure that our athletes are taken care of. They do a ton behind the scenes that you never see, and I'm telling you, we are not 13-0 last year. We're not 10-3 the year before. We don't start to turn things around without the Battle's End. So if you're not supporting, I encourage you to go do so. If you can't support financially, go subscribe to their YouTube. Go follow them on social media. I'll link all of that in the description. Help us move that ship forward. For any flack that Florida State and Mike Norvell does get right now for the way that they recruit high school, none of that exists with the portal. None of that exists with the way that they crush things with transfers. Norvell talked about a 65-35 split, somewhere around there. I asked him about that last year again when we were chatting, and he said that they're always evaluating and they're always trying to manage the roster based on the current needs there. It seems like a 2/3 to 1/3 transfer is about where he's landed. It seems like that's about what their go-to is. We'll see if that changes over time. I think that's a pretty good mix of young talent that you're continuing to mold and develop, and then older guys that can come in and lead and understand what it takes to win. The one thing that has remained consistent, what Norvell has talked about and what he's told me, is we are going to make sure that guys are a fit. It doesn't really matter if they're a high schooler. It doesn't really matter if they're on their second team. It doesn't matter if they're on their third team. We want to make sure that guys fit. And if they fit from a culture perspective, it doesn't matter when or where they come in. And I think that's why Florida State's had success with the portal. You haven't seen just the absolute culture breakdown from bringing guys in from different places, because their first metric that they look for is not necessarily ability. It's will they fit in this locker room? There's questions around sustainability. Can this continue to work? Can this continue to happen? 3 years ago, they were saying this is not sustainable. 3 years ago, they were saying Mike Norvell cannot continue to recruit from the portal. Well, he continues to do it. They have a top 3 class again in the portal. But the real question around sustainability is going to get answered this year. I think this year it feels like, and you guys answer in the comments and let me know if you think this is the case as well, it feels like there are less superstar names that Florida State brought in. That's not a shot at anybody. That's not me talking bad about any of the kids that we brought in, but it feels like you've got less Jared Verses. You've got less Keon Coleman. You've got less of those type of guys. Now, I really like Florida State's class. I love the 5 Bama transfers. I think they will be vital players for this team. Obviously, DJU at the top of the list. He is going to be very important. Marvin Jones Jr., you think about the other defensive end, the defensive tackle transfer, Richie Leonard coming in from Florida, Devontae Brown from Miami, Jalen Lucas, Jacob Rizzi, also Marvin Jones Jr., big deal there. But what does that class ultimately look like? I think there might be less superstar talent, but I do think that they have a chance to have more hits, more contributions from almost everybody in the portal class. There's also another portal window coming soon. Could they add more? Is there a DT out there that they could look to add? Is there another linebacker? If a wide receiver one like a Keon emerges, will they go after him? I think so. I think there are potentials for them to add more in the portal even after this spring window. But this year's portal class will really test the sustainability of the portal. Can they continue to do this? To me, this is the portal class that has the most questions around it. The most, hey, I don't know that anybody's coming in as a guaranteed day one starter. Obviously, I think MJJ will. I think DJU will be. You think about Benton. You think about Roy Dell. You think about others. Will they beat out the guys on the roster? If not, did we recruit a lot of depth out of the transfer portal this year? And that will answer the question of sustainability. But at the end of the day, Mike Norvell is right more often than he's wrong. And a lot of teams get more guys than Florida State, but they don't get the level of guys that Florida State gets. And that is what has made them more successful than anyone else in the country in the transfer portal. I don't care about Lane. I don't care about Coach Prime. None of that is even close to what Florida State has pulled off in the portal this last couple of years. Will it continue? We'll find out. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Spring football getting going today. Excited for it. Thank you guys. We'll talk to you soon. Go Noles.